Do roll call. I want to read a letter we received yesterday. Dear Committee Chair Joe Hickman, thank you for all the opportunity to represent Kent County citizens for over 30 years. My position on the Planning and Zoning Committee has been important to me. It has been a joy to serve. I feel now it's time to give someone else the opportunity to serve. Strive to preserve the great agricultural land in Kent County. Sincerely, Bill Sutton. We'll have the roll call. Jim Saunders.
Here.
Ray Strong.
Here.
Paul Ruge. Bill Crowding. Here. And Paul Reeder. Here. And I'm here. Francis Hickman. Has anyone had a chance to look at the minutes? And are there any amendments, corrections to them? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Our first applicant is the Humane Society of Kent County, Inc. / E. Michael Granger, and they're looking for a zoning text amendment for adding the adaptive reuse of existing structures as a special exception in the AZD on parcels under 20 acres. And this is a recommendation to the county commissioners. Is staff who's present?
Michael Granger.
Oh, yeah. Is staff going to present?
As you wish. What order would you prefer?
Staff first,
Okay.
usually. That's okay. I'll get you. That's the order we did.
Thank you. So the item before you is a proposed zoning text amendment. This is a little unusual for zoning text amendments, I would say in a good way. This is a proposal that's included in the draft land use ordinance that you're currently reviewing. It is specifically designed for some of those existing buildings in the AZD that are on small parcels, so small that they can't even be considered a farm. Because of the way AZD is structured, the uses in AZD are pretty limited to farming, and when you have a parcel less than 20 acres, you can't be a farm. Some of these buildings, I understand there's churches, like in the case of the gentleman who's about to speak, it's the former animal shelter building. So this was specifically designed in the proposed land use ordinance to allow those kinds of structures to someone to propose a use, and that use can go to Board of Appeals and be decided if that's appropriate for that particular site, and therefore buildings don't stand derelict and unused. So what this zoning text amendment does is take that small section out of the proposed land use ordinance and bring it forward as a text amendment to be considered now, so that things can start to move forward. And staff recommends approval. We did meet earlier even earlier than that. We met in September with the Agriculture Advisory Commission because they were meeting on other issues. And at that time, the application was about to come in, and we presented the text, and they were supportive of this and felt it was a good use. So wanted to include that letter, and that letter is also in your packet. So staff recommends approval.
Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Granger, sorry, come on up.
Just learning the rules.
Yeah, I am too. Can you,
You've been here 30 years, I doubt that.
no, can you state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, my name is Edward Michael Granger, and the property I am here for is 10720 Augustine Herming Highway.
That's where mail correspondence should go? I mean, mail.
For the business, yes.
Okay, all right.
If you want personal,
I think that's fine, as long as you get
Okay.
mail there. Can you raise your right hand?
Yes, sir.
Is the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
We are proposing to put a roofing and home improvement business in the site. It is currently, it was the Humane Society, so we're looking to, we already have a contract in the area, and we've done this in another location. We come from, our home base is Southern Maryland, St. Mary's, and we have done the same process in Hagerstown and had a lot of success with it. We purchased, we actually get, it's a state highway contract in the area. So right now we have the District 2, which is Kent County, Queen Anne, and Cecil, I believe. And so we already have work here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to build our residential business as we already have revenue coming in from that. And it's worked out really well in Hagerstown. So we wanted to repeat that here.
Good. Commission, any questions for the applicant? There's no correspondence, I forgot to ask. No, there's no, okay, thank you. So what do you expect to do with, what will it look like when you're in business there? The buildings will still be there, or are you going to?
Yeah, no, the buildings are going to stay. We're actually, we're going to use the front part of the building as an office area, and it'll allow customers to come in. We don't get a whole lot of traffic. We're going to get maybe 1 or 2 customers a day, but we will be hiring from the community. So we're going to have a staff between 4 and 10 at any given time. The goal is to obviously hire from here and we'd have a secretary, office manager, and then a crew of between 4 and 6 workers.
And the reason to text amendment now is because of timing? You don't want to wait for
That's
the
correct, yes.
potential
Yeah,
land use?
we've already purchased the building, and we want to start working on it, and
Gotcha.
we want to start, get working on it right away.
Okay, thank you.
How big is the property?
It's 3 acres.
3 acres?
I do have a question, Joe. I'm very familiar with that facility, having been on their board for a while. And I think what you're doing, frankly, I think what you're doing is a great adaptive reuse of that property because it's sat vacant and in deteriorating fashion for quite a while now. There's a whole set of kennels behind and all that stuff. Are you doing any demolition?
We are not going to demo that. Really, the amount of space that we need is just the office area. We're actually going to possibly fix up the kennels, and maybe in a future time, we can either lease it out or sell it as a doggy daycare or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to, it would be a lot of work. And, they're built really nice, but we plan on painting in there and fixing all the gates and actually just redoing it. And then it'll just have to stand as is.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, we need, of course, this is not just site-specific, this is the applicant asking for this change, but we need to address the goals of the comp plan and consistency with the land use ordinance, so, in making a recommendation. So if someone wants.
And public need.
And public need, thank you, Cindy. So those are the elements that would be put into a motion if someone chooses to make one.
Well, before we do that, Joe, I did want to bring everyone's attention to the findings of fact that the applicant has provided to us. I found them to be very detailed and compelling. And given, this is not the only property in Kent County that has been abandoned, or not abandoned, but has been vacated and then doesn't have an easy use transformation. So we're going to find that happening, I think, more and more in Kent County, not only among facilities like the Humane Society. We have a building and there's not another Humane Society or kennel to move into, but we're going to find it in a lot of other kinds of buildings. One thing that I found, I learned the other day at the planning conference, was that houses of worship are another set of structures that we may find ourselves having been abandoned because they're no longer maintaining their congregation and can't afford to keep up their property. So we're going to be confronted as a planning commission, I think, with these kind of issues going forward. A text amendment, in my view, makes much more sense in terms of being able to deal with these situations efficiently than a special exception process. So I'm going to recommend to you this finding of fact, and also note here for the record that I believe this approach makes sense from a administrative and planning perspective going forward, because there are going to be other situations we have to address.
But we were going to address this in the land use ordinance soon anyway. I mean, I appreciate their need as a business person to move faster, but I think in our task force, we recommended this anyway.
Okay.
So, and it's not that we didn't think of it, it's just timing here in this case.
This is just AZD. Now, I know it's in the new, the new text. But is it just for the AZD, Bill, or are there other zoning districts and zoning areas that it involves?
It's proposed just for the AZD, because AZD has the sort of unique quality that if you don't have 20 acres, you don't have the primary use allowed in the zone.
Yeah.
Most other zones, the primary use is not, doesn't have that same sort of method.
How does it, I guess I got a question, how would you look at, this has nothing to do with your property, but how would you look at a farm that is broken up into several parcels, similar to the one that we had a couple months ago, where they had a 20-acre piece of property that they wanted to do something with, that had 3 or 4 other buildings on it, and if those buildings, even though it's a farm, a couple hundred acres, it was a 20-acre parcel within that couple hundred acres, would that then also fall under this, and they could take those 3 or 4 barns and make them into a storage center or into a packing plant or whatever?
Because it's a special exception, it would have to, the Board of Appeals would be the decision maker about that. It would come through you all and go to the Board of Appeals for that decision. They would be weighing the reasonableness and appropriateness of the proposal. So if something were unreasonable or, inappropriate, then I would imagine they wouldn't approve it.
Because that's
And
my,
they have to use the buildings there.
right, no, I understand it. That's why I'm bringing it up, though, because there are farms like the one that we just did, that Kent Mills or whatever. I just happened to bring, I brought the stuff with me, but theirs was a 20-acre piece, which would fall under this, if they could take the 3 or 4 buildings, make a distribution point out of it, reusing the buildings, just, they're pole barns, yeah, but you could put sides on a pole barn, you can insulate them, now you got for lack of better words, don't get me wrong, but a mini Amazon or something like that.
Going concern.
But it could be other things, you could turn them into small businesses, you could do a lot of different things, but, and if this is just in the AZD district, you're taking what is farming, what everybody wants, and desires in this county, and they could eventually, those properties could become something else within those farms. And some of the farms are made up of several properties. I mean, we've had several things in front of us where there is, the property that's being farmed is more than one plot, and people don't want to combine the lots. So they wind up making just a,
But it's still adaptive reuse of buildings.
It would be
You're not-
adaptive,
so
right.
If they had a parcel of raw farmland, that wouldn't change its use.
no, it wouldn't change the farmland, but I'm just pointing out that, with that 20 acres, just think of where it's going on that, because, you could take a 20-acre piece that has buildings on it and turn it into something else that may or, but as you say, there wasn't anything there as far as who reviews it, and if it is, it needs to, there needs to be a mandatory review of some sort. And as long as that's there.
Anything else, Jim, or anything? If not, anyone have a motion? We can vote on.
Do you want to take a crack?
You take it.
Okay, I'm going to make a move that we approve this application, and I need to, based on the staff's recommendation and finding that,
And we want to just send a favorable recommendation.
yes,
Yeah, just
send a
so- I know
favorable
what you meant. I
recognition
just
to the
trying to
Board
make
of
it clear.
Appeals, okay. Let me get there. Having found that the petition is consistent with the comprehensive plan, that that the site will have access to a public road, that the proposed use will not generate traffic of a type or amount that's inappropriate to the access roads and surrounding area, that the use will not require road improvements detrimental to the character of the area, that the number of dwellings on the property will not exceed the density permitted in the district in which the structure is located, that the proposed use does not create an unacceptable impact by way of noise, odor, noxious materials, or other nuisances, that the landscaping is in character with the building and the location, that we recommend that we send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals that this petition be reviewed as an administrative special exception process. Have I covered the waterfront?
I just want to, I think you're reviewing the standards for site plan. And since this is not site-specific, you do want to address public need. And you got consistency with the comprehensive plan.
I'm sorry, where,
I'm not sure what you're looking at.
Ms. Rieger is actually looking at the conditions within the special exception.
Right.
I think she addressed everything but the public need.
okay,
Is that really?
that,
Yeah, page 4, A, B, and C is kind of where we are.
A, B, and C. Okay. I don't see what in the package that I have. Okay, this proposal is consistent with the definition of public need for the proposed amendment. And we find that the property is suitable for the uses permitted under proposed zoning.
And the comp plan, I think you mentioned before.
I did mention that it was consistent with the comp plan. Is that appropriate for amending the motion? Okay.
We're making a recommendation to the county commissioners to change the text, to make to a text amendment.
To change the text amendment, but it's not site-specific.
No.
Right.
I'm sorry. Okay, I understand what you're saying.
So you've amended your motion then?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And I amended further to specify that what we're doing is making a recommendation to the county commissioners.
I would suggest that you list what they said think the public need is. Just down here.
You can adopt the findings. You can say that you've reviewed the findings, the staff
The staff
report, and
findings.
you adopt those findings.
Okay, okay. Further amend the motion to state that we have considered the public need, found it consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land use ordinance, and had found that the public need for this amendment would be to encourage the expansion and promotion of small businesses throughout Kent County and the maintenance and reuse of existing structures.
Thank you.
Can we have a second?
But, well, and then you want to vote on the amended motion.
But do we ever, we never
We nev-
acted
they
on the
never-
motion. I think we just had a motion. I mean, before, she started over, I guess. We didn't really amend, we never.
No, you didn't.
We never addressed the first, we didn't.
Well, she kind of amended it. You could say that you withdrew the first motion, or you
Would you like me
amended
to do
it.
so? I withdraw the first motion and submit the second
You
for
amended it.
a second and approval by this commission.
Yeah, that works.
That's good, thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. Paul LaReader,
Aye.
Bill Crowding,
Aye.
Paul Ruge, Ray Strong,
Aye.
James Saunders. And I'll vote with the majority. So we'll send a favorable recommendation to the county commissioners, and good luck in your businesses here. Our next applicant is the wharf at Handy Point, and they're asking for a growth allocation for map 19, parcel 96, and 102 near Wharton, Marine District, and this is also a recommendation to the county commissioners. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. So the item before you is a growth allocation. I think we've only looked at one of these before since, in the last 4 years. Earlier this year, a ministerial map error correction was noted to be made to our zoning map from 2002, which will show more area zoned for marine zoning for this property than was previously shown in 2002. That correction will be made. It's contingent upon the approval of the Critical Area Commission's review of growth allocation. How our process works is this body makes a recommendation to county commissioners. County commissioners are the body that would adopt utilizing growth allocation for a property. Then that goes to, once it's approved, it goes to Critical Area Commission for their review. If they confirm that, then that indeed is allocated, and then the zoning would be confirmed on the map. I think we've discussed that previously. The actual growth allocation policy is included in your packet. There's some history with this property, and I've asked the applicant to sort of go over that with you, review sort of how the property has changed over time so that there's full understanding of what we're doing. Because this is moving from, there's 3 levels of critical area utilization. There's resource conservation area, and that's really everything in RCD before any allocations are given. Then there's limited development area, that is a single allocation that's given to have limited uses, and then there's intense development, and that requires double allocation. So that's why the allocation amount is twice the acreage, because we have to do it 2 times. We're taking from RCA to LDA to IDA. And I think the applicants will be able to walk through their application with you. They've also provided suggested findings. At the Board of County Commissioners need to make those findings. In the past, we've asked applicants to please give suggested findings. We wanted you to also see those suggested findings so that your recommendation might be able to help the Board of County Commissioners know that you've reviewed those and what your thoughts might be on those suggested findings. And that's really, I'm happy to answer questions. That's sort of the overview, and I know the applicant has a lot of materials to present.
Good,
So, yeah.
thank you.
Thank you,
Was
sir.
there any correspondence from the public? Or
No.
we- Okay,
Not that I'm aware of. Yep, thank you. And staff does recommend approval.
thank you. Is the applicant or the representatives here?
Yes.
Come forward, please. State your names and addresses for the record, please.
Thank you, Chairman Hickman. My name is Lance Young with McLeod Law Group. I'm representing the wharf at Handy's Point. With me is Buck Nickerson with Extreme Measures. Behind me, sitting right here, is Mr. George Harms. He's the owner of the property at the wharf at Handy's Point. And across the aisle from him is Chris Meyer, who's the property manager at the wharf at Handy's Point.
Is anyone besides Lance who's testifying would raise your right hand and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true?
Yes.
Thanks, Buck.
Go ahead, raise your hand.
Oh, already did.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, you did, you already did? Okay. All right, and this is the site plan that Buck prepared, so if you all like a
Good,
copy.
thank
I'll
you. Yeah,
probably
with-
get ready to distribute that to you.
So, you test me with these little, Buck, you, don't move.
So this
Go
is,
ahead.
this is a request for growth allocation for what is now tax map 19, parcel 102. It's owned by the wharf at Handy's Point. Like Mr. Mackey said, this is, I think he said the first in 4 years of growth. My understanding is that this is the second time in 20 years that growth allocation has been requested. So it's not a common thing. It comes up in unique circumstances, and the unique circumstance that it comes up in this case is that all marine zone properties in Kent County must have that IDA designation. And what IDA designation means is that within the critical area, there are 3 different designations. One of them being resource conservation area, one being a limited development area, and then the third being an intense development area. So in order for a property to be moved up from one to the other, growth allocation has to be granted. So if it goes up from an RCA to an LDA, Resource Conservation Area, to a Limited Development Area, it has to be given growth allocation for that. In this case, we're going from a Resource Conservation Area to an Intense Development Area, so growth allocation has to be granted for that. And as Mr. Mackey explained, because we're jumping up 2 spots, double the growth allocation has to be granted for that. The way that we got to this point was because during the 2003 comprehensive rezoning process, several of the marine zones in the property were granted a blanket growth allocation to be given IDA. So at that time, all of the marine zone properties were given IDA designation. In 2003, this property requested that the entire property, and then a little bit more, be zoned marine. And what happened was a mistake, and what we petitioned the county commissioners was that there was a mistake where that line was actually drawn. So for over 20 years, parcel 102 was split zoned. Part of it was zoned marine, and part of it was zoned something else. And so because of that, for over 20 years, and the mistake wasn't realized until 2008, because of that, for 20 years, we haven't been able to use a lot of that marina property for marine purposes. All the marine purposes have had to be consolidated to that small area where it was granted, close to the water there. So we petitioned the county commissioners this year to correct that mapping error, and on July 25th, the county commissioners voted to change the zoning line so that all of what is now parcel 102 is zoned marine. So the county commissioners have voted to make this entire parcel marine zone, and so because it is now voted to be marine zone by the county commissioners, it has to have that IDA designation to go along with it. Okay? It has to have that growth allocation to go along with it. So we're going to have to get a recommendation from you to go back to the county commissioners so that they can get that growth allocation and request that from the Critical Area Commission. I know that's confusing. We're here to answer questions. The immediate need for the marine zone and the immediate need for the growth allocation is for 2 reasons. One of the things that we've been trying to do on the property for quite a long time now is put in an up-to-date, state-of-the-art septic system. The Wharf at Handy's Point, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that property, but there's the Greenpoint Marina, which has historically been a separate marina, which is right next to it. They've both been consolidated into one marina. It's under one common ownership, and it has 2 failing septic systems. One of them is way worse than the other one, but they both need repaired, both of them need replaced. So we've been trying to put in a state-of-the-art, best available technology septic system onto that property, but where we need to put that septic field is on the portion of the property that is uphill, which was not currently zoned marine. And there's this odd critical area law that says that you can't have one portion that's not IDA serving another portion of a property that is IDA. And so the Critical Area Commission has translated that into meaning that you can't have a septic reserve system in a non-IDA portion of the property that serves a portion of the property that is IDA. So that's the immediate reason why we really had to get that zone marine and why we need that growth allocation so we can get in that septic system. Without that septic system, it's polluting the Chesapeake Bay. We need that best available technology system in there so that it doesn't pollute the Chesapeake Bay. The other immediate need is that because only a portion of the property has been zoned marine for the last 20 years, a lot of the marine activities that we do have to be consolidated along the edge of the water. And what we would like to do is we'd like to take some of that off-season boat storage that now occurs right there on the water and move that up the hill on the other portion of the property so that the off-season boat storage can take place away from the water and further up the hill. So for those 2 reasons, we have an urgent need for getting the growth allocation in the marine zone. The application process is quite lengthy. I don't know if you've taken a look at our application, but there's a lot to it. I don't plan on going through everything in that application with you. If you have questions about it, we're happy to answer those for you. Some of the more important things are that this commission has to consider for their recommendation is that the property itself, to get growth allocation, is supposed to have an economic benefit to the county. The wharf at Handy's Point is a fully functional marina. It brings a lot of economic benefit to the county. It pays taxes to the county, and it doesn't use very many county resources in exchange for that. It supports other businesses in the county as well. Another thing that has to be considered is that it needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. If you've taken a look at the staff report, they point out a couple reasons that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. One of those being that it maintains and strengthens natural resources. Now, that seems kind of counterproductive when you're asking for something that's an intense development, but the reason that we're asking for that intense development designation, at least in the short term, is that we want to do things that benefit the environment. We want to put in that up-to-date septic system. We want to move boat storage away from the water. Those types of things are not beneficial to the Chesapeake Bay. What we're trying to do is. And then the third and more important thing is that to get growth allocation, it's supposed to be consistent with the critical area law. And in a nutshell, what the critical area law is there for, what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to benefit the Chesapeake Bay. It's supposed to keep pollution from going into that bay. And again, the activities that we are proposing are things that are beneficial to the bay. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. If you have additional questions about, how we got from 2003 to 2020, we're happy to answer those questions. But with that, I'll stop talking and let you guys let me know if you have questions.
Thank you. Okay, it's up here for questions to the applicant or comments.
I also have that plat overlaid on an aerial photo in color, if that would help you guys paint a picture of what's going on there. I'm happy to provide those to you.
I guess here, anything you have to help us.
Where's the septic reserve area for Green Point Marina when it was?
North Marina, if you were to go in, go past it, turn right off the Greenpoint Road, go past the bathhouses, when you start up the hill, the drain field is there on the right on the left between the driveway and the bank behind the mechanic shed.
Well, that's pretty steep property there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a small system. It's just a single drain field.
When were the two marinas combined? What year?
So we're actually in the lot line adjustment process now of actually combining the two physically together. Mr. Harms bought the North Marina about 2 years ago, and that's when it started. I'm saying right 2 years ago. It's when the management took over both sides.
So ultimately, it will be one single
Yes,
piece of property
yes.
under one management.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And we've been through the technical advisory committee. That was on October 11th. The plat is currently at the health department to be signed, and then after the 30-day appeal period, I've addressed the comments from the TAC meeting. Hopefully sometime the week of November 11th, we'll get it signed by the planning office and record that lot line adjustment plat for joining everything together.
Has the health department reviewed your septic
Yes.
amendment proposal?
Yes.
Have
And
they?
we've been working with the health department. Gary Jellick is a septic consultant. He's been doing the soil test and submitting his reports to the health department for, it's been going on for a year now.
Have they issued a report?
Has Gary,
He has, he's waiting on MD supervisor approval, so it's very close.
Okay. And when do you expect that whole consolidation process to be completed?
3 months ago?
You're not sure?
Not sure.
Okay.
Jim, did you have some questions? I heard you mention.
I listened to what you presented and also read some of the things that was in this folder. First of all, I want to ask, if I'm hearing you all right, the first thing was that King County made the mistake, right?
That's what we're saying, yes.
That's what you're saying.
The map, whoever drew the map.
Right.
Whoever drew
It
the
didn't-
zoning map.
That wasn't. So now you coming back and you trying to make it right, make it one marina, right?
Yes.
Okay? So it looks like that, I think with what you presented here, it's a good option to make this one marina.
Right.
And what you're saying that you're going to put in another system, you talking about the bat system that you put in, top of the line,
Yeah.
right, today. And to protect anything what you put in there for the system, right? I mean, for this marina.
Right.
You combine it all in one, but if I'm what I don't understand is, we gotta move from, maybe Bill can explain it to me. We have to move basically to make this a complete marina. What do we have to change, Bill?
The change is, we're sort of halfway through it. The idea was to rezone the property, just to make it a simple term, I know it's a ministerial area, but, so only a piece of the marina has marine zoning. The area that they want to use for increased uses doesn't have the marine zoning. So the first step was to have the marine zoning of the whole property.
Right.
And this is the second step, which is to give 2 levels of growth allocation, to get them up to the highest level, so then the state can approve those uses.
But the reason they have to get rezoned again, because they didn't zone it right the first time, right?
And I'd just point out it was 2002, so.
Since 2002. Now you gotta go back and get it rezoned, correct? For the state to approve it and the county commissioners to approve it?
Yes, and the county commissioners have already voted to change the zoning.
Well, that's good. Then I don't see why you ain't down here, then just go and get it rezoned.
Jim, you're right. The one thing on growth, what we're weighing, and we have quite a bit of growth allocation available in the county, we haven't used much, is that have they proven in their testimony they're gonna be provided enough economic benefit in this business plan, increasing it and then increasing the environment? Is it
Right.
worth giving the growth out? Because you only get so much. We've used very little, but that's our determinant. Is it worth it? And cursory review says we're getting economic benefits, obviously, because it's going to be a better marina
Okay.
and bigger, and then the environmental case. So that's what we're making a recommendation to commissioners, that it's a benefit to use up what portion of the growth allocation we have for this business. Someone else in Rock Hall could have another marine business, and we'd have the same thing if they wouldn't increase or do it. But that's the only step we need to do is say giving 52 acres of growth allocation is worth a benefit to the county. Is enough benefit to the county, and they provide a lot of testimony. I hope everyone read it, but it was, seems very positive to that.
Well, I would say that the testimony that they give is pretty compelling.
Yeah.
And I've been here for 33 years, and I was familiar with, in fact, I was friends with the owners, the previous owners and operators of the Greenpoint Marina, and have seen it over the last 33 years as being 2 tiny marinas that didn't add a lot of benefit because of their size and operations to the county. And I think, as you say, Joe, this consolidation makes eminent sense. And that's, I think, the question we ought to be asking ourselves: does this make sense? And in my view, the answer is yes. The 52 acres of growth allocation is de minimis in terms of what I think, and you can confirm this, Bill, what I think we have available. So it's not like it's cutting into opportunities for growth allocation elsewhere, because we've never used the amount of growth allocation we have.
I don't know about de minimis, but I agree it's a small portion. But like we were talking before, just in general about, I think Anne Arundel County, did they use all theirs or something? Yeah, and my point being, it's forever. So I think that's why we weigh is this a benefit now? Someday, some commission, maybe there's only 52 acres left, and have to say, what do you do? I don't think we're
All right,
there.
well,
I
at
won't be
present,
here.
it's small.
Yeah, I'll grant you that. Well, it sounds like we have a lot of positive, but we need is there any other questions for the applicant? Go ahead,
I
sorry.
got a couple questions. One, I'm just looking at the aerial view with all the boats, and I drove down there the other day, so that I've become a little familiar with the place, though I have been there before. The amount of boats that are in there now, and they would sit in the existing slips that are in the water, I'm assuming. And then you've got all this storage space up in the back. Where do those boats go? If you should put those boats in the water as well as what's already there, or is some of that storage space going to move?
We do propose in the expansion to move, so right now, in order to pull those boats out of the water and have dry wintertime storage, they literally shoehorn them in that parking lot
Right.
on the
I
south
saw
side.
that, right.
That area is in the floodplain and it's right adjacent to the marsh. If all those boats were stacked in there in February and we had a flood or something like that, they could, they would float
Gotta go
away.
catch 'em.
And our idea is to get them up on top of the hill and back away.
So some of that storage is going, what we see here is going to move to the top. of the hill.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, because I'm looking at it and I'm saying, geez, now, we're looking at double the amount of boats here.
Yes.
Now, this is going to be interesting without building a lot more docks.
Yeah.
You know, okay, so that's what's going to happen there. Which ones are going to go away? That north end, or the upper end up here, the narrow end
I'm not sure what,
up here?
really, none of the boat storage is going to go away. What happens, like I say, they're stacked in there so tight,
Just going to spread them out a
it's
little bit more?
just be spread out where, so like, for example, really, I don't think on the south side of the road, in front of the bathhouse there, like I say, you couldn't get, if the way it's been done in the past, if that bathhouse were to catch on fire, the fire department couldn't even get to it. You know, this is going to open up space to come and go. I think they'd like to do some remodeling in that bathhouse. This would give room in the wintertime when the marina shut down for the contractors to come and go out of there.
Just curious, 'cause I just saw, I see a lot of spaces and not enough slips, and I'm just scratching my head how you're going to do that.
Yeah.
But I can understand if you're going to spread them out, that's good. And then one just totally off the record, when I drove down there the other day, as you're driving in to your right and driving out to it's on your left, but there's several, I used to work for the phone company, and it looks like phone wire, but I don't know if that's power wire or what, strung all through the trees. And that's pretty dry in there, and you might want to take a look at that. I don't know what that wire is.
That's on the opposite side of the road, that's not on the marina property. On the right side of the road going down?
Yeah.
Yes, that's been down for
It's
20
dead.
years, and it's on a different, not on the marina property, and it's on Green Cove Estate.
Might be on Green
property.
Cove.
Yes.
No, I understand, that I get. I was just curious what it was, because if it was live and in use, somebody might want to take a look at
Yeah, I
that.
think it was phone line, and they buried that phone line 20 years ago.
You ought to ask them to get rid of that.
Yeah,
They should
yeah,
do
it's
it.
not on our property, so. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
You can call the phone company, you work for them, call them.
He's got connections.
I don't know if that's Verizon or what. I used to work for Verizon, so.
I think that's the only one we have around
But,
here.
yeah, that wasn't,
No.
that wasn't, like I say, that wasn't the record. I just happened to see that, and I didn't know if that was their property or their phone line or what. I just pointed it out. It's not good, really, to hang a deer in there one day, if you haven't already.
Well, our charge
one
here
more.
is to make a recommendation to the county commissioners, and for this growth allocation, they've got the zoning change that we didn't, and then the public need and how it complies. So if someone,
One more off the question again, to Bill. What is the size of our growth allocation? Do we have any idea
Yeah,
what?
there you go.
It's over 1,000 acres.
Over 1,000.
there you go.
Is it in there? Okay, I'm sorry.
Like 1134 or something.
119308 left, well, prior, currently, and then they would take 52 of it, so we'd have 1,141.
To give a little context, statewide, what happened is the critical area in each county, 5% of that area is what is allowed for growth. We're on a peninsula with thousands of inlets, so we have lots and lots of critical areas, so our 5% is pretty generous compared to what our needs are, so that's why we have a lot of that.
No, I just missed, I'm sorry.
I understand that at some point there was hope that perhaps other counties would be interested in buying our growth allocation for lots of money. We haven't had any
Is that allowed? Is the critical area allowed?
I don't think so, but I think there was discussion long ago, I understand from Carla, that they were hopeful that maybe that could be a profit center someday, because we probably won't use all of that for us. And of course, towns got allocated, so towns are covered in the.
Hold on to it, you never know.
And you guys all, summary, any summary for?
Bill, do you want me, I am prepared to cover all the details of the steps through if you think it's necessary.
That's up to you.
It's, if these guys are happy with everything and everything's covered, I'd rather save their time.
Okay.
I'm ready to make a recommendation if you're ready to
I
sit
think-
through the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think Sydney's gonna make me read it all. I make a motion that we send a favorable recommendation to the county commissioners to grant a maximum of 52 acres of growth allocation to the wharf at Handy Point Incorporated. After review, the board finds that the comprehensive plan supports the improvement and expansion of facilities, services, and activities that support natural resource-based economic development, that a new septic system will increase the distance between the shoreline and the drain field, which will reduce potential negative impacts to water quality, that the new septic system will utilize BAT, which is best available technology. At this time, the applicant is not proposing mitigation over and above what would be required to mitigate potential negative effects caused by a higher intensity development than normally allowed. The applicant has submitted a letter from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Wildlife, and Heritage Services that indicate there are no official state or federal records for listed plant or animal species within that area. The application is for the expansion of an existing IDA, that's intense developed area, and is related to an existing marine use. The area of expansion is potentially a maximum of 25.69 acres, which will be clarified prior to finalization of the growth allocation. The applicant has outlined additional findings in a supplement and narrative to the application for growth allocation of the wharf of Handy Point as to how the project is consistent with the goals and intent of the Kent County Comprehensive Plan, Land Use Ordinance, and Critical Area Program, which members of this board have reviewed. We find that there is a public need to support accessibility to the water by residents and tourists. And in addition to a new septic system, a portion of the expanded marine zoned land will be used for out-of-water boat storage, which will require a separate site plan when reviewed. The marina currently allows trailer parking for small fee by users of the Greenpoint Public Landing, and an expanded boat storage area may allow for additional uses of this landing. We find that the proposal is consistent with the critical area law, and as stated before, the applicant's narrative supplement that they've provided will prove that the standards for submittal to the Critical Area Commission and the Coastal and Chesapeake Bay, as found in the Natural Resources Article 8-J808I(c) and COMAR 27.01.02.06 through .064 have been met. Is that enough?
I missed something, but you will start over.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? We'll call for the vote. Bill Crowdy?
Aye.
Paul Ruge?
Aye.
Ray Strong?
Aye.
Jim Saunders?
Aye.
Paula Reeder?
Aye.
And I'll vote with the majority, so hope you make out with the commissioners and the Critical Area Commission.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's nice. Neat form, too. What we've all been waiting for, we're going to bring out our proposed draft land use ordinance and start our review with Articles 1. Bill, how do you want to proceed? Just,
However you want to convey comments, there are two pieces of correspondence to this that we saved up over time for when you got to the
When you get to them,
relevant
okay.
articles. And I also have a report out on Agriculture Advisory Commission, whenever you're interested. They worked on Article 3.
okay. If we get there today.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to clarify that we're reviewing, or what we said we would review in the last meeting was 1, 4, and 7. So we had in here 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think we expanded it because we thought there were a lot more items coming to this meeting. And so the items that we expected, large items like the solar field and certain warehouses, did not come in November after all. So I think we just expanded it. And maybe I made a mistake. I thought we were done with definitions and that individual members were going to send me comments on definitions if they had things to, like corrections and things they found. But that's just my memory, so.
I guess I can't remember what's in the minutes
Well,
now.
it was in the minutes. I thought you had some definition questions.
Yes, I did, but I didn't get them to him, so I wasn't, that's my negligence.
Well, I mean, we can
Yeah,
see how far we get.
Yeah, right, and I think as we get into, start with, 3, if we get there, or 2, if we don't, we would love to do this all at general meetings, so if we get through, we'll keep going. If we need to stop, we'll stop. We can put it on the agenda again. I mean, the public had to be notified that we may be reviewing it, that's all. And if we don't get to it, we'll put it back on for the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Joe, I shared with Bill my comments on definitions that I thought were just, they don't affect the meaning or the applicability of the land use ordinance. And I felt, and I think Bill agreed that process was a lot more efficient than trying to go through every single definition
Yeah,
here.
but that's why I think that, we were supposed to get them to him, thank you for doing that, and if you
Well,
still
get
have
them
it,
at
we
any
still,
time.
yeah, we can still, so.
There's no deadline on that. Except maybe the end of December.
Yeah, please. A dream, maybe. All right, well, we're on Article 1, as we roll through, did anyone note any particular issues or concerns, as you noted here?
I have one that talks about right of entry, Bill. And it says it's only to be in the form of publicly noticed in ADA accessible public meetings on the site. There are some sites where ADA accessible may not be possible, so I just have a question, which is how do you handle that?
So really, the goal of the provision is to prevent meetings from happening that are not ADA accessible. So the reason the standard's there is if you can't have an ADA accessible meeting and you can't notice it, then you can't have that meeting. So it limits what sites, and again, the idea is that individual members would not be entering properties and obtaining information that other members wouldn't have access to. So you would do it as a group, and for it to be fair to the public, that occurrence needs to be publicly noticed, and act as a public meeting, and be in an area where it is ADA accessible. So it's correct. Not every property may be eligible to be reviewed in that manner, and that's just.
Are there alternatives for the review?
Well, I mean, we do use aerials, we use other ways of access without actually physically accessing an individual property. And actually, since I've come here, I don't think we've ever had an individual property that the board went to view as a group. I don't think that's happened. That would be unusual.
Okay.
Right, we had I think Paul had asked whether we could do one on a project in the past, but we decided at the time, I advised at the time, where it was in the review process, that it not be done, because they have to be done in accordance with the Open Meetings Act and publicly noticed.
And I think the heart of that is the public has the right to see you making decisions. And by being on the property and gathering information and discussing it, that's part of making a decision. So, yeah, I think that was a great observation by Cindy.
Bill, I only had one on the whole thing that I had been able to look at on page 6, where it was for the advertisement, and we took out where it would be in the property would be posted, and that you really had to refer to the local newspaper. You know, a lot of people don't buy the local newspaper at $2.65 anymore for, you know, and then have to look into the public notices for it. I just think, you know, posting it, you get word of mouth around here more than you do.
That's not
Reading.
sufficient.
Right.
That's not sufficient.
Well, if I might explain what happened. So in the current code, the provisions for a zoning map change and a zoning text change are sort of blurred together. And the idea was to separate them out. For applicants who come before you, those properties would still be posted. That's required under a different article. But the idea being that the portion of the text that addresses a zoning text amendment, really a property posting wouldn't be appropriate for that particular place. That's what's happening on page 6.
So the animal shelter wouldn't have been posted today
Right,
because it's.
because it's a ZTA, right. So that was part of the sort of detangling those two processes and trying to make them separate. Newspaper. So in the part that got added, all the red type over on page 5, a posting is required because that's a zoning map change. This is a physical place to post, if that
Right.
helps. It's a little confusing, but hopefully it's less confusing than the original. That was the idea, but maybe not, Bill, maybe not.
All right,
Yeah.
you've
Sorry about
satisfied that one.
Okay.
Is there that?
Well, I clarified that myself today.
There you go.
I had a couple comments on this section, if you want me to jump in here before you move on to another one. And I can do what I did before, which is put together a memo or list of comments. But I thought it might be helpful to go over with Bill the review process, because it seems to overlap. Number 7 on page 5, under zoning map processes, it says the process outlined immediately below, but then and I'm assuming that means section 4.1, but then there isn't reference in this section to the map amendment. And then paragraphs 4 and 7 are almost the same. So, I mean, it would take a lot to go through those paragraphs right now, but I can go over it with Bill and
And that may be an artifact from,
Well, I had the same question that you did on Article 7, immediately below, because there doesn't seem to be anything that follows that relates to the zoning map review process.
And one idea I had was maybe make 3.1 application for zoning map amendment, 4.1 application for zoning text amendment, and then a separate section for processes that would be applicable to both.
okay.
That's really about it.
Thank you. That makes sense, thank you.
The reference to removing administrators, that's just to be consistent with the department, all that was, or was, we never because we don't have an administrator technical.
Right, at some point in history, there were two positions,
Okay.
so, but
So that's
there
just
there are
consistent,
no
yeah.
longer, yeah, there actually were forms where there were two places for two people to sign, so
Yeah.
I don't sign twice. And just trying to make that clear, because I think it's a little confusing when it seems like there's this position, and then people will ask, well, who's the zoning administrator? We'll say, well, it's Bill, well, he's the director, well, he's also the zoning,
Yeah.
at some point, the jobs were merged. Maybe someone remembers when that happened, but I imagine it was a long time ago.
Sometimes it's also used just as a generic term
Oh,
in
okay.
case law, so.
The department also had a different name, it was at one point as well, so, but that could be it, yeah.
You know what? One thing when we get these text amendments, the main thing comes up all the time is public need. We still have that in here, but we still don't have it into definitions. And I think it would be, if we could come up with, I don't care if it's what the world calls a public need, if we come up with what Kent County determines to be the guidelines for a public need. And at least then, you know, it's there. I mean,
It's kind of one of those subjects of law that there's case law, there's opinions, there's a whole kind of realm out there. I think us defining it as our own separate little definition from the rest of Maryland might not be advisable. It's sort of, as they call these things, a term of art.
I'll tell you, we've had a lot of zone and text amendments, and the things comes up every time. And, Jesus, we're getting them left and right, it seems like. It's just hard for me to argue for it or against it sometimes.
Well, if it helps, Bill, from my point of view, if there's something in the comprehensive plan that supports the action, and the comprehensive plan has a lot of goals, I mean, I think that's sufficient to show a public need, right? We have a comprehensive plan that's been vetted, adopted, confirmed, and it has a list of things, and if an action that's proposed is supported by that, I mean, that's just my opinion. I'm sure there's a better legal opinion than that, but I think that could be a public need.
I agree that you can look at that comprehensive plan and find where almost everything that comes in here, you can find where it adheres to the comprehensive plan, but then you can go through it and find where they don't. You know, it's in conflict with the comprehensive plan. I don't know, that's the hardest one for me ever sitting up here, honestly, the public need. I don't know.
I agree with Bill. It's
And
just
I don't know that you
understanding
can
what is the
define.
public need. I mean, you know.
Well, I've read it before, I'll read it again from the case law.
Can you make us a copy of it?
Okay. The judicial gloss given to the definition of the need requirement in Maryland special exception lore has been that it means expedient, reasonably convenient, and useful to the public. So it's supposed to be an elastic term, and it doesn't mean the traditional understanding of need as necessity. So for example, if there weren't any stores of the kind that's being
Marie,
proposed.
that's always, I have a problem with, like, we had it on the pier, was the public, they wanted a better pier, and they wanted deeper water out on it, and that's, Admiral, I understand that, but how does the general public benefit from that, the public waters of the state? You could argue that it was in contrast to that, but, you know, that we determined that as a board that there was a need there, but the need was really their want. I mean, they're gonna replace it, but it was a want, and we get that a lot, where, you know, they don't have to do anything, really. They could just repair what they've got, but they want, you know, so demonstrating that need is the problem.
But they're also part of the public.
Yeah, but the public also, you know, it's a question of people that, you know, the public that would use that water where they've now restricted it. That's, it's public waters of the state. I mean, my point is, that's what, reflecting what Bill says, we weigh that. But it's, like I say, it's not always a need, and maybe that's the elastic term. It's how we determine that, how useful it is to the county. Like today, we determined that, you know, the adaptive reuse was important to the county because we have a building sitting there that's not generating any positive need to the county.
Well, I think what, Cindy read in sort of my plains person language is that the semantic field of the term is supposed to be really large. It's not supposed to be closely defined. It's meant to be sort of general and abstract. So, in this sort of way that when you say what's a public good, well, there's lots of things that are public good. There isn't a real acid test to that. So,
I think one of the clues to me is 90% of the applicants don't know what their public need is, and generally your staff has to provide that guidance for them. So, I mean, if I'm submitting something, I would hope that I knew what the public need would be, but.
for most folks doing a zoning text amendment, it's their first one ever, so.
And they hope they're last.
Probably, yes.
So I guess the question is, Bill, do we need the public need finding at all? I mean, I don't,
Does it exist in any
think-
other land use ordinances? Have you read? I
Not
haven't.
that I haven't,
I don't think it's- I
take all
don't
my
think it's
time
very
reading this
widely
one.
used,
Yeah.
but it would be easy to find out.
I'm just curious if they did, what they put in it, if that was, how.
It's a different definition of need or a different way to state it, so. It's,
I think it's the first, I don't remember it anywhere else myself.
I think the simplest thing is just say we send a recommendation and let the Board of Appeals determine what the public need is.
I think to me, public health, safety, and welfare is much more common, which is really nice and broad.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, the general police power of zoning, but, I mean, we could look at it and see if there's something
I'm
else.
just curious, if it existed, what it would sound like, would it be helpful? Maybe it's just as, elastic. If it's going to be an elastic term, it doesn't, we'll still won't get to where we want maybe.
Well, should we do that, look at it?
I'd be curious if someone, I don't know how hard that is to do, just to find. Maryland, I'm not talking about
I
the world.
can shoot out an email request to Mako about counties if you want to check I imagine there's some reference that you have access to that might give some indication to its popularity.
Perhaps
I
Clyde
have-
can
Just
just
read 23 different.
I have a compendium and you can do word searches, so I can do that. And not spend a ton of time on it, but a little.
Great, that sounds good. Yeah, there is a lot of sort of thought spent by this body on that. Maybe we don't need that. Maybe it can be a more general decision. Might be easy for you all. Okay. And in general, what Article 1 is bringing together different various parts from around the code that I sort of think of the things under the hood, right? This is sort of what makes the car run. So it's nuts and bolts kind of stuff as opposed to the direction to the private property owners to what to do. This is more about functioning, how you all function. So. And I went ahead and moved nonconformities up to this section because they are it is sort of another standalone functional thing, and thought it might be easier to find up front. And we're not doing a lot to it.
Right, that was something I wanted to comment on. Because we've actually been looking at it recently, non-conforming use. And, yeah, there isn't, the only processes really are for, we don't use the term certifying, but, what is the term that we do use? It is, here we go. The existence, determining the existence. So that's something you do, but there really isn't a process for it or notice provisions for it for anyone else to know. And the other area is abandonment. Right. And I have looked at other ordinances for that. And there are processes in other ordinances for looking at whether something's certified and that can be an administrative review. Looking at the enlargement issue, which can be a Board of Appeals review. I think in Talbot County, the Board of Appeals does a lot of those determinations. So that was just my general comment, is that it's, there aren't a lot of processes here to say who makes those who in those limited circumstances, but. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I thought this section did delegate responsibility for determining non-conforming structures to the department. So that's a part of their administrative processes. Am I correct, Bill?
Well, I took out zoning administrator and substituted the word department, but there isn't a lot of process. Essentially, we do a memo, a decision and determination memo that's appealable. That's what we have done in the past. So, and I basically put in provisions to make sure that there's a clear, easy, direct, identifiable path to the Board of Appeals, because the minute it gets complicated, that's probably where it's going anyway, so. And I agree with Cindy, this is very, very light on process, and I think, until recently, I think there were not, a lot of these cases didn't come up, but more and more coming up as time goes by, because things are getting more complicated, and, there are issues that arise. And when Menaries Dream Alliance came, and there was the 3 nights of public hearings, I had a chance to ask Mitch Mowell about a few of the sentences in this, which I really seemed a little confusing. He said, yeah, one of the sentences, which has now been proposed to be removed, he said is an artifact from a much larger process that used to be in this code that was removed, all but that one sentence by accident wasn't removed. So there was some kind of much more formal process, but it was, for whatever reason, at some point in the past, probably long past, taken out. So we've sort of relied on sort of the decision determination process, which is appealable, as all are, to address this issue. I mean, we certainly can handle it other ways. I sort of feel from your comments that we might be vulnerable by doing it this way. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I just know with the Legion property, that was an issue. There was a motion to dismiss on that ground without getting into all the complexities of that because of when the decision was made, I think it was, or how it was made and whether anyone was aware of it. So one piece of that is how's the public aware of when these decisions are made? And there may be reason for someone else other than the property owner to know when something has changed or when a decision is being made.
And actually, based on that very incident, there was a newspaper advertisement placed last week for a decision and termination that I will be issuing on the wharf at Handy's Point. So that's how we corrected that under the current code. That notice, I'm actually placing it in the newspaper and telling people a decision is being made on November I think it's the 9th. So gave 2 weeks notice. So that's how we're handling it under the current code now. After that, everything that happened at the Menaries Dream Alliance.
Does that process need to be added in terms of the language of section 1?
Well,
that's an action you will undertake in all cases.
so for legal non-conforming uses, it's been elevated to Board of Appeals, which requires public hearing, public notice, our normal process under Article 4. For non-conforming structures, it's being handled as an administrative decision without a public hearing. If it's complicated, then the department can, or I can refer it to the Board of Appeals. So it's sort of being divided in half. Half of it's going to the Board of Appeals, and the other half is just being handled as an administrative decision without a notice. So That's how this is currently worded, it doesn't have to be that way.
In some jurisdictions, the existence is a certification process, and it's a bigger deal, you know? You're getting something that you're getting a certificate. And I think I had looked at, Howard County had a whole set of rules of procedures for just that. Talbot County, as I mentioned, the Board of Appeals is heavily involved in making those decisions. And Queen Anne's it's similar, somewhat similar to ours. There is a certification process, but with respect to other.
Is that handled administratively, the certification
The
process?
certification process
For the staff.
is, I think it's the planning director. I just had it, and now I've lost it. Oh, here it is. Planning director.
Would it be hard to outline what you're doing now? Would that be benefit? Just, you already have your process you've outlined yourself with some notice, some whatever, would it, without even doing a certification, just outline the process the public would see? I'm just asking.
We could certainly include more in the proposed code.
I hate to
do that.
include more, I just said if that would help that we do have the people that said, what was the process? We just do what we think is best, we do a review, the director does a review, and then,
It's the other aspect of it, you
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
If you have a non-conforming property, what do you do when you're
Right.
going to do any of these things? And it's a little difficult to determine.
So
I can see
Adam-
if you put a certification process in, though, people that have nonconformities would want to get certified. I mean, as a process of, like, building permit, you'd get certification so you protect your future.
And then alterations and enlargements, there's not a process for that.
We're going to get back all those pages you got out.
Yeah, we didn't remove much in this section. It was
Yeah.
always sort of Spartan. There is something for enlargement of structures under 6.11, and this is essentially the same language as in the code. There's no real changes. A little clarification in red, just to make it read better, but it exempts private schools, houses of worship, and and dwellings that existed of some date. And my understanding is that reflects some other requirement elsewhere.
Well, Maneri Stream is a legal non-conforming use, correct?
It is now. Yes.
Okay.
Took a court decision to
I
affirm that.
understand,
Board of
but-
Appeals affirmed it, and the court then also affirmed it.
But we just went through the process of approving a site plan for the enlargement or expansion.
We didn't
No?
approve anything, it was just concept plan, and it's
Well,
one
we
thing to talk
reviewed
about it
But they have
at
a
the board.
process they have to go through if they want to do anything, right? And that relates to any property,
Right. A site plan
Site
review is for any
site plans.
kind of
Right,
project,
right.
So
So-
this is definitely an area that's kind of murky. But we can look into something, we can come up with a sort of a list, we can insert somewhere of steps to make it more obvious what's happening.
Talbot has a certification process, is it?
Yeah, and a process for enlargement. Like I said, most of them are through the board. I don't want to say most, because I haven't studied it to memorize it,
Would it
but
be helpful
the Board of
just to
Appeals is
send that,
involved.
send it out as everyone can look at, something that,
Sure.
see if it's worth it, and if it, gives us an idea.
Yeah, if you want to see that.
Yeah, I guess I could look it up myself, but I'm thinking if
No,
you
no, I
send,
can-
everyone could get the same thing and see if it's something that would be wanted or needed.
We can compare.
Yeah,
And I guess one question is, how often have we had these non-conforming use issues come up? And then you're saying perhaps we'll see more in the future.
Well, time creates that, doesn't it? I mean, the fact is that as we march on, then the world changes with the after, you
We're
know.
about to change the zoning code, so for sure we'll create some non-conforming uses,
Right.
known or unknown, because we're not, we're not aware universally of all the uses that are out there,
Right.
so. Yeah.
Well, I hate to add more, but maybe if this is gonna, I hate to have applicants like Maneri's Dream and the neighborhood there in court to, you know, if, without us being able to say, we followed a standard, whatever that is. I mean, it wouldn't have changed their feelings about it maybe, but it would have less said, we had a process. Maybe it's take something off you, even if it's administrative.
Okay, we can do that. And if you shared the thing from Talbot, that sounds like a great place to start. While we're here, I do want to just sort of say that there's sort of a reverse way of doing this, which I don't think I've ever come across a jurisdiction that does it this way, but there certainly seems to be some desire in the community that uses that existed even 25 years ago that were discontinued should be able to be started up again in their original old building without any fuss, because it was built as an X, so therefore it should always be able to be used in the future as an X, even if zoning and conditions have changed. There's actually a fair amount of people that we talk to that sort of feel like that's a reasonable approach. I mean, the public and others. So I don't know if you want to think about that. That would be sort of eternally grandfathering everything in. But I think from the layman's point of view, a lot of people are sort of surprised that their building that was originally built as X can no longer be used as that, even though there's been no changes to the building because, it wasn't used that way for 20 years and now it's not legal anymore in that zoning district. Whereas if the building just happened to be somewhere else, they could use it. So I think that's frustrating for people. I don't know how you want to handle it. I mean, most jurisdictions, the whole goal of non-conforming approach is that once we change the zoning district, we want everybody to catch up and have only the uses permitted. So you want nonconformities to go away. But, this is a unique place like everywhere, but, there's a lot of stress and economic stress, and there's a lot of historic buildings here that have been here for a long, long, long time. So maybe taking a different approach for Kent County would be okay. I don't know. I just wanted to raise that because that does come up fairly frequently, that people are frustrated by that fact.
Well, one thing on some of these non-conforming structures are they were built at intersections of roads but
I've seen one that was built in the road.
well,
yeah.
but at that time, I mean, I can remember 20 years ago on my road, I could lay down in the middle of it at 8:30 and wouldn't get run over till 4:30. Now, you better watch what you're doing so things have changed, which makes a lot of those buildings that were built years ago, they would end up being a hazard right now if they were reopened and used again.
What about the old milk plant like that? Now, it was used as a facility for milk, and right now it's a neighborhood around it pretty much. And that's that's hadn't been used for how many years? 40?
More than that, probably 50 years.
I'm just saying, that's my concern is now, once that neighborhood changes, the expectation is that, that could be, obviously it's not in great shape, but that, the use could be expanded. That's the trouble of this forever thing, because I think the neighborhoods change around there, and people have, they have a kind of an expectation that what closed is for that long. I mean, it's, to me, I understand the trouble with the 2 years when a commercial building sits just for because of the market, and everyone kind of said, well, if there'll be another service station there, but it's closed, and then it goes away. Then they say, wait a minute, I would have expected that, but after 20 years, you'd say, they're never going to put one back there. But I don't know, obviously, there's no perfect sense in this stuff anyway. But.
And I'm not making a recommendation, I just want to let you know that that's sort of a thing that constituents sometimes get a little confused about, so it's just a thought on the table. So, there's a lot of different ways to, cut the cake, and we don't have to do it like everybody else if we don't want to.
No, I don't, just.
But I think we want to encourage adaptive reuse.
Sure.
And so there should be a process where you have a non-conforming structure that gives due consideration to appropriate, what may be, very well be, appropriate adaptive reuse.
We got a process for that, we just went through it today.
Right,
Through it,
right.
yeah. And, because your non-conforming use, if it was good 20 years ago and it's not now, and people have moved into an area and don't expect it to build up, I mean, there's gotta be some pretty strict rules for allowing that business to start up again, because there may be very good reasons why it shouldn't, let's just say it was a coal-powered power plant.
No, I understand that completely.
You can't-
But I'm thinking, maybe we give ourselves the flexibility of a special exception process to look at
I would
those
say a special
situations.
review, there's gotta be some kind of review process, maybe.
Well, of course, a special exception requires a review.
Right, but,
Well, if like the milk plant was designed there because of the railroad, but what if, say it's not for that many years, say it was 25, and then it's used for storage of food products. Well, now they're not gonna use the railroad, they're gonna use tractor trailers. And that's the kind of thing that, they'd say, wait a minute, I understood the train coming by every, week or whatever did it at that time, but, the world changed around it.
Look, I'll be honest, I own 2 of those buildings, and I can't imagine using them now in this day and age compared to just 20 years ago. It's, there's houses there now where there weren't houses. I can imagine, I'd be treated like I used to treat some of them people when I sat out there. Now it's,
You would no longer be the mayor down there.
no, it's just of North Wharton, they take South Wharton away from me. But, no, I don't know,
It's
So where are we?
Well, we have a process, I think that's what we have. I think whether we want to avoid the public and the commission, and the county from going to court over things, it's to have something defensible, that's all. Here's your process, it was reviewed administratively, and, at least they get, it's not that, the public had an opportunity to participate early.
Sounds good.
Moving right along. Are we ready for
Brings us
Article
to the end
2?
of Article 1, I suppose.
Yes.
God, we just instilled in that.
Yeah.
Now, Article 2 is each and every one of the zoning districts. So currently, there's proposed to be a dozen, reduced from 17. And at least in our code, my understanding is that, the highest and best use here is agriculture. And so AZD is sort of the beginning point, and everything beyond AZD is sort of, in a way, a minor reflection of AZD as it moves from primarily farming through the critical area to residential uses, to commercial uses, and all the way out to the edge with, industrial and marine uses, which are the most intense. So you'll notice that agriculture sort of tracks through almost all those districts in some way till you get to the very end. So, and when you read through them article by article, you can sort of see the progression. And this is the existing code. There's just some reorganization. And the big news is removing enclaves as requested by the task force, and substituting in a different requirement for accessory residential structures in the rear yard. That would be 10-foot setbacks in some cases and less in other districts. We wanted to vary it across districts. And the height of an accessory residential structure is to reflect the height of the existing primary structure as its maximum, as opposed to a specific number of feet.
I think that was probably one of the best ones I saw changed in here.
Yeah. Thanks.
I really do.
I have a general concern about how animal husbandry is handled throughout this section. Number one, I can't figure out the difference between animal husbandry, horses on non-farms, and a private stable. And what I'm finding here as I go through each of these sections is that the different categories are treated differently relative to whether they're by right, by accessory use, or by special exception, and some of those distinctions for individual categories don't make sense to me. And I think I would suggest that we need to go back and review these things. For example, in the ag area, animal husbandry, including feedlots, horses on non-farms, limited livestock and fowl, are treated as special exceptions. I don't understand why that would be the case on a farm. Why not, why is that not by right? I mean, you go down smaller, and all of a sudden, those same categories are by right. If you go through each of these and compare the two permitted uses. So I think that bears some additional thought and possibly consolidation of the stable private and the horses on non-farm, which would make it less detailed. The other thing in animal husbandry is that we've talked about adding other categories of livestock to the pool, including llamas and alpacas and other creatures, and they're not mentioned anywhere. So we may need to broaden the category. Perhaps doing the small sheep or goats and other ruminants would be an approach.
Most of the exercise in the animal husbandry category was to add that term so that all of the animal-related uses would all fall together on the chart in the same place. Most of the actual uses themselves are preserved from the previous code. The Agriculture Advisory Commission, under uses, but it reflects to what you're saying, made some specific requests about, and I'm going to do a summary for them that they can review and make sure I got it right. They wanted some simplification of language. They felt that we have a lot of requirements that are, not a lot, but there are some requirements that are no longer necessary. Some of the approvals by different agencies, et cetera, they said really don't need to be set on the zoning code. We're going to have to do that anyway, so why haven't this, and that some of the terms that, and agencies that are listed, they said, well, 20 years ago, those were the agencies, but no more. So we're going to do some cleanup language for the uses, and they had talked about some consolidation. So I'm a little behind. I haven't done my follow-up memo for them. They met on October 23rd to give them the sort of the final version of what we talked about language. Once they read that and they're happy, I'll forward it to you all, and you can see
Okay,
what
I was going
changes
to
they
say,
made.
that would be a,
Yeah.
we should wait and, not have two tracks here, or at least
Right.
start with what
And
they.
they didn't make wholesale changes, but they made some tweaks in the sort of the category that you're talking about, but same sort of issues. Why do we call it that?
That makes sense.
So, and the terminology is updated, like things like confinement area and feedlot are no longer the terms, it's AFO, KFO, and, is it MAFO? So, but they talked about that and how that our code really should use the current language, so. And the other thing they talked about was wedding venues, and the idea that basically is I pitched was not to really have any specific requirements, to let the item go to Board of Appeals without specific conditions, and let whoever the applicant is pitch what they want. And let the Board of Appeals, with your all's advice, sort of, look at the individual place they want to do it, and, have a list of kind of issues, transportation, catering, the bathrooms, the parking, that they need to address these issues, but not have limitations like it's only between 11 and 4, 3 times a month, and all those things. Let that get negotiated for each deal. So I know some counties have very, very specific requirements, but they went through rounds and rounds of changes to get to those requirements, and I think, although I understand from the meeting with Agriculture Advisory Commission, there may be more of these on the horizon than I realize, but I think sort of individually working it out with each proposer might be a simpler way to approach it. And Agriculture Advisory Commission was okay with that as an approach, leaving it open-ended, so they were okay with it. Because I think every situation's so different, yeah, so.
I think the way we're working it now seems pretty good. I mean, you know, and I remember during your hearings or your meetings on this, when Buck Nickerson was saying, you know, he's not opposed to them, but you have to remember that it isn't, the wedding is at 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and at 5 it's all over. He says that wedding starts on Wednesday. When the trucks are coming in, the people are setting up, the band's playing late, then all day Sunday tearing down, traffic back and forth. It's, some places it's well suited for it, some places it's not, so.
Does everyone here agree that we ought to be looking at the animal husbandry thing and how to?
I'd like to see,
Streamline
yeah,
that.
I agree. I'd like to see what they advise, so we don't do
Right,
we go
right.
back and
No,
forth
I
again.
agree.
We just start
I
with one
agree.
process and, you know.
And the one thing I'd like to note, if there's no one online, but if someone listens to the recording later, is once in a while we get a question, you know, if my daughter wants to get married on my farm, do I need a permit? And the answer to that is no. If it's your own family member who lives on the farm, you're gonna have a wedding, that's, you know, you can
We
do that at your
still can
house.
comment on the partner, though, if we don't agree with that.
There you go.
We can
Yeah.
use you for that. It's not permitted.
Stand-up funerals.
Need parental approval.
But that is not a zoning matter.
Yeah.
How many, are there that many applications for weddings?
Right now, there's just been folks inquiring. There haven't been many inquiries, but at the Agriculture Advisory Commission, a gentleman from the audience said, I'm actually here to listen to that part of the discussion because I have someone who's interested in establishing a venue. So there's definitely interest out there. I think we haven't really addressed it in our code, and folks are sort of waiting for us to do that, but I don't really have an idea of how many interested
And
parties
then-
there will be.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to them with the conditions, but also we need to recognize the current venues are trying to make a living that spend
Right.
significant money to the, you know, the Great Oaks and to do it right. And that, you know,
Good
that,
point.
to me, that was, when we talked, whatever happens with glamping, one of the concerns there is we made Bay Shore go through, they went through to do it right with approvals. And then if you don't go down the path that you don't have to do as much, it kind of makes the people that invested the most say, wait a minute, I didn't have to do all that. You know, and so, I mean, but if you have a special exception, at least the public can weigh in on specific sites and offer conditions and things like that.
Well, they would have to, wouldn't they have to pass Board of Health and whatever, because you're serving food, you've got all kinds of different things. If you're gonna do it as a commercial entity.
Well, I'm just talking about, you know, having say you have a farm state, or just a nice
Right.
farm, and you know, people come up and say, you know, I'd like to have it. You know, maybe you could do a few weddings, but if, you know, the scope of it, if they say, well, we're gonna have weddings every weekend, that's different in parking, and there's different ways. I think there are, you know, everyone seems like, I've managed farms in 5 counties, and, you know, a lot of them have nice venues for short reviews and nice houses, and they get asked a lot, but, you know, you can't just, the bride and groom are always looking for the next great venue sometimes, the next something a little different, and, but that's different than if you do 2 or 3 a year as a courtesy, even not as a moneymaker as much, but, and then, than the people that spend money. So I think it's, you know, it just needs to be, we need the special exception, so it,
They can get pretty expensive. I was just at one in Vermont, saying, you know, just what we're talking about.
oh, I know that, I've been through it.
I've been to a few others too.
No, unfortunately, I had to pay for them, that was the difference. Going to it was one thing. But, yeah, I mean, I think we need it, I think it's an opportunity for, you know, tourism in the county and things like that, but just that fine line of every weekend next to you, here come the trucks, and you go, wait a minute, I can't live with this.
Yeah.
And that's when you get into health department things too. If you're gonna be that permanent, you're gonna
Yeah, if
start
it's
to
gonna
run.
be a commercial entity, I mean, that's different. I mean, let's take, you could look at something like, even just as an example, like Crow Winery. I mean, they've just expanded their building, closed it in. I mean, I hate to say, there's a perfect wedding venue, you know, for people.
You can also hire
They
a
do have
licensed
weddings.
caterer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know they do.
So you don't have to do any of that part.
What was that? I missed that.
You can also hire a licensed caterer, and then you don't have to do all the.
Right, yeah,
Because they
that's-
already have that covered, right?
Typically, they want their own anyway.
Yeah, but you still gotta have your facility. If you got 150 people there, you've gotta have health department. There's a lot of things you gotta have in order for it to be safe,
Yep.
you know, and you're talking about your ADA laws and everything else. I mean, all of that has to be part of what they're describing. So, you know, 1 or 2 a year, yeah, that's a hobby. But if you're gonna do, you know, 2 a month, that's not. And 2 a month that's a commercial establishment, really.
Actually,
why
if
we
you're
have it.
making money, that's a commercial enterprise,
Sure,
even if
absolutely.
it's just one.
Having some kind of rules and regulations.
Okay. Any specific comments on any of the districts?
Yes, I would like us very much to revisit the question of the 10% rule. In going through this in detail, what I'm finding is just an incredible number of different treatments for different circumstances that to me don't make sense.
Paul, I'll tell you, they hashed that 10% rule now for 2 years.
I think I should be allowed to express myself on this.
We've
Bill.
listened to it.
Let me tell you where the inconsistencies arise. 10% rule applies to everything over 100 acres, under 100 acres, excuse me. It says that if you own a farm of less than 100 acres, you can only subdivide 10% off of it. So I own a farm of 60 acres. It's zoned ag. I get to subdivide 6 acres. Okay? If I have a farm that's 102 acres, I get to carve up into 3 parcels, 30 acres apiece. Does that make sense? We have another section that relates to the RCA, Resource Conservation District, which calls for between 7 and 60 acres, that says if you want to subdivide for your family, and family could be a lot of different people, you have the opportunity to subdivide 7 to 12 acre parcels into 2 lots, and 12 to 60 acre parcels into 3 lots for that purpose.
What does that have to do with the 10% rule?
What I'm saying is the way we've approached allowing people to manage their property is inconsistent.
I disagree completely.
I don't, well, why, how?
Because we have zoning districts. RCA is not AZD.
Well, RCA is supposed to mirror the AZD. That's what it says specifically in the book.
But mirror doesn't mean exact, it means,
I understand. I'm just saying the way the county is treating people who own property here, who choose either to have their property zoned agriculture or not, but may have the same exact acreage, differs considerably. Now, what's the difference between a 99-acre parcel that's zoned ag and a 102-acre parcel?
3 acres and the definition of the 10% rule.
Right,
I
so
just don't-
does the
I- this-
10% rule
this is-
make sense?
This debate is wrong now. How many meetings and hours did we spend on, thing? You brought it up at the Planning Commission, Maryland Planning Commission. Was it a taking? Was 10% rule a taking? You brought that up at the Maryland Planning Conference. That was the stupidest question I heard there.
Sorry, I disagree.
I just think that this is ridiculous when the Ag Advisory Committee has weighed in on it. That's our lead for agriculture. They unanimously said leave it in. We've had many hearings. And I just think it's ridiculous to bring it up at this point.
Well, what you haven't acknowledged is the fact that you got 2 petitions from 300 people throughout this county who disagreed, who said we should eliminate that rule. And they included people who are farmers, they included people who are not farmers, who want to be farmers, who can't afford to buy or
Well, when the
access their
county
own.
commissioners have their hearing, I hope they're all here to ask for it.
Well, I think they will be.
Oh, good.
But, so I'm raising that in this venue, so that we could have a discussion amongst ourselves to consider some of the issues I don't think got considered previously. And the question about taking that I raised at the planning commission meeting, the conference, was to a person I thought had some knowledge who might be able to shed some additional light on the question. And I do think it could be construed as a
He
take.
did not, but
Well, the one thing you said something about if you have 100 acres, you can cut it into 3 30-acre lots.
No, 102 acres.
You can't. They're large lots, so on 102 acres, you've got 10.2 acres of developable land. So you can only cut out the number of lots unless they're over 100 acres. If you've got 200 acres, you can cut 2 100-acre lots out. But the 100 acres don't count, a 100-acre lot doesn't count against your density. But if you've got.
100-acre lot
if you've
doesn't
got-
count against your density? Is that true?
Yes.
Because 100
Parcels 100 acres or larger do not count towards the maximum development percentage of the property.
In other words, it doesn't count against the 10% rule.
I'm sorry?
It doesn't count against the 10% rule, right?
But
That's
if
what it says.
If you've got 100 acres, you cannot cut 3, or 102 acres, you can't cut 3 30-acre lots off of it.
That's not the way I read it.
You can cut a 10-acre or a 10.2-acre lot off of it.
You couldn't divide it into thirds under the 10% rule. There's some exceptions, but in general, right, the 10% rule limits farms that
Oh, and by the way,
created after a certain date. Sorry.
there's not your density thing calls for a footnote number 7. I couldn't find that.
Right, so how it works is if you have your 100-acre lot, you have 3 buildable rights, right? Because it's 30 acres per house, so you can have 3 houses, but the lots that you create have to only total if it was 102, then the 10.2 acres. So you would have 3 lots where your houses, or 2 lots with 1 remainder that would have to be, like 5 acres apiece. So you could get your density, you'd get your 3 houses, but you couldn't create evenly divided lots. You'd have to put those 2 houses on little lots. That's basically what the 10% rule does.
that was what it was for.
It controls the size of the parcels created. You still get the 3 development rights, you just don't get to evenly divide the property for the 3 development rights. Does that make sense? Maybe not. Okay. Don't worry, it took me 2 years to figure out what the 10% rule means.
Well, maybe it makes sense to comment on the process here as far as
Sure.
recommending to the county commissioners the land use ordinance. So, I mean, we're reviewing the separate articles right now, but once the final document is prepared, then you'll have a public hearing for the purpose of the recommendation
Right,
to the
to
county
forward it.
commissioners. So I think at that time, if you wanted to say something, you're free to express it. I mean, certainly now you can, but it's whether the other commissioners are willing to
Right.
talk about it
No,
again.
I understand, and if they're not willing to talk about it, fine, but I have the opportunity here to raise the issue.
And again, when the planning commission meets for its recommendation. And then again, I guess the public will be, the public's going to be weighing in at the county commissioner level.
Okay. Well, an omission here, Bill, I think if you look in the density, it says there's a footnote number 7. And I couldn't find footnote number 7.
What page are we on? I'm sorry.
21.
So there's a footnote called 7, and there's no number 7. Yeah, as I was looking at this, I think because some things were deleted and added, the numbers have gotten out of sequence, so I'll check on that.
So, yeah, where are the actual footnotes?
They're on
Footnotes
page
are on the next
22.
page.
Oh, I
It rolled
see.
over. Originally, it all fit
Got
on
it.
one page, but things got too big.
I was
You have
looking for
1 through
something tiny.
6,
They're sort of side notes now.
but no 7.
But if number 2 wasn't deleted, the first
No,
number
this
2, there would be 7, but that's probably.
Yeah, they're automatically generated, the numbers generated when you do changes, then it gets mixed up. I'll try to fix it.
Yeah, I can see there was a 7 until you took the 2 out.
Right, yeah,
But
sorry
you
about
put a
that.
different 2 in.
No,
Yeah.
Yes, they did. You
Huh.
have 1, 2, 2.
they took 1 out.
Took one out of the total, so you still have 6.
Well, it wouldn't have been number
Should be
2.
It can be
I'll
fixed.
try to figure out what happened.
Whatever happened, yeah. But I don't see, for example, number 6 doesn't relate to density.
That's it, I would question the numbers, you know, the relationship of the footnotes to the numbers
Something's
Right.
out of
on the
whack,
sheet.
Right,
sure.
okay.
Yep,
That needs to be straightened
sorry about that. And just to add on to what Cindy said, my goal, with both fingers crossed, is that when I have all your comments, I'm going to accept changes to the document we have, all will be accepted, and then all the things you're saying now will get added as text that's changed, marked as change up, and that your recommendation, I hope, will be, our recommendation is this document. That's, okay, right, okay, that's
While we
the
had
hope.
Bill, what did the ag advisor, what did they say about the 10% rule?
We didn't talk about it. I mean, not in this round. I mean, they talked about it
Yeah,
2
right.
years ago when
Yeah.
they gave you a recommendation, but we didn't discuss it.
Okay.
They were focused on animal uses and some of the
Okay.
other things, yeah.
That's what I said, it'd be probably good for us to get that, so we don't
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry it's not before you
No,
already.
that's fine, hey, I'm glad we're getting this far.
Hey, Bill, when we're talking about animal husbandry.
Yes.
Did they have to come in and get, even though it's an accessory use, did they need a permit for that?
You know, I want to say it kind of depends. If they're doing anything that involves building or putting something up or structure, yeah.
You know,
If they're using an existing building and there's just a different kind of animal, I'm not sure if, we might just do a use permit or I'm not sure.
Well, when
Different
we-
animal, it's
when-
adaptive reuse.
When we adopted the chickens, they had to go to the health department and get a permit.
This is the backyard chickens.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
And then, and like I say, I don't know who polices that, but you know, if you get up 4 o'clock in the morning, you realize there's a lot of roosters around this area, unless chickens have started crowing. And, they're not allowed, but.
They are not.
You know,
That's what they make machetes for.
Ray's neighbors don't have roosters.
And I think
They got
in here-
roosters, but they still don't have them now.
That's right.
for dog kennels, I think there ought to be a requirement that can't be located any further than 1 foot from the owner's bedroom window. Because they put them as close to their neighbor's property line as they possibly can get it and as far from their house. But don't make a note of that. Just a thought.
I had started the
It needs to
note
be
and I
in
thought, I'm
setbacks.
not
That's
sure
what
what
we
I'm going
put
to
in
do with that
setbacks.
note. Yeah, okay.
That should be under setbacks.
And if you all think there's a better term than animal husbandry, I was just trying to do a catch-all term that that would be at the beginning of the alphabet, that would show up in the list first, because that's usually, I mean, we had a use called more than 4 horses, which would appear in M. I don't know how anyone would find that unless they already knew it existed. So if there's some other terminology, I mean, it's all easy to fix now. We can change whatever you want.
I'm asking the board here and staff too, and what is our schedule as far as today? Tell me what people want, if they want to march on. I'm not offering an opinion, I just want to make sure everyone's, if there's a plan, how far we want to go.
I'd love a 5-minute break.
That I agree with, there you go. Let's take a 5-minute break, and if people are okay moving on, we will. If you don't, just weigh in.
Thank you.
So
And we're gonna leave all the equipment running, so your conversations won't be private, but just, I'm afraid if we turn it off, we can't get it back.
Turn your mics off.
Yeah, that'll,
Leave it running. Thank you very much.
TGIF.
2 weeks if the government doesn't get their arms together.
If the government doesn't, oh, yeah. You get affected, don't you? Right to your wallet?
The thing is federal employees get reimbursed for the time if it actually happens.
Right, but consultants don't get a dime, right?
Well, fortunately, up till now, they've done that. They've forced us to go along with the federal,
Oh,
which is like the one law that we had several years ago. I applied for unemployment and everything else, I had to pay the damn thing back. They reimbursed, they paid me. on
Right,
that base.
right.
I had to pay back the unemployment.
Oh, oh. That's not fun.
Fortunately, I had a suspicion that was going to happen, so I just put it in separate.
On Social Security, so very low, it might have only been $70-some a month at that time. But he died like on the
How you doing, James?
25th.
You didn't have a doctor's appointment today?
As soon as that yesterday, it went on record.
I gotta make a trip today.
Computers got it, they
I gotta go pick my son up
Where?
in Delaware, soon,
In Delaware?
train thing.
father both.
Coming in for a bit?
He's coming into my
Can't do anything else quickly, did you get that?
sister's funeral Saturday.
Ah,
He died,
ah.
and he's coming in for that.
You know, I saw Mr. Y passed away up there. How he had to be 100, Jim.
98. He was 98.
Still lived at home.
Uh-huh.
He used to tickle me.
I didn't know. It was, related to me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and, he was like my father, my uncle, my cousin, and my friend. And he was really my mother's nephew, and made me and him cousin, but everybody thought that he was my uncle.
Yeah, he right out the end of that road, sit there and turn around, ride home.
Yeah. In 97,
Well, someone was at the house, when I was up there last time, there was a lady there, a niece or something maybe, was taking care of him.
that was his daughter.
Okay.
Judy. Yeah, they put him away last Saturday. Yeah, no, a couple Saturdays ago. And then my sister died. And now they're gonna have a funeral for her. This when you saw my son and daughter when they was home, help us get something straight. But we was down there, they treated us to our 50th anniversary.
Well, they spent some money, but then cheap eating in that damn place, I can tell you that.
Especially,
Somebody over at your table had the crusted rockfish or something.
Yeah.
Was that any good, did they say?
yeah, Mom said it was pretty good. Yeah. But he liked the mussels.
Yeah.
I was like, see, Dad, you want a mussel? I said, no.
I like them sometimes, but,
Try to read this.
sometimes they put too much garlic in it, and I don't like it.
New glasses.
But then, the time we meet, she flew on back to Atlanta, but she was actually in Mom is coming in. I gotta go get him this evening.
We're at Wilmington. probably 30 years ago.
I said,
Got on Amtrak, went on up New York, they treated you good. Now they treat you like you're some kind of damn animal getting on there. It's terrible. Last time I went was a couple of years ago, but I thought this can't be the same.
So I remember early and I listened to stuff.
It was a whole different ballgame.
They remodeled the Wilmington station.
Come to find out, I knew that was some of the stuff I was
And like I say, it was. Yeah, I think they had done that when I was up there last time, a couple of years ago.
Benicia is in Mexico, so got fly back, and land and fly. That's Saturday.
I wouldn't try it with this. You'll be asleep in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Ready to get back to it?
I don't like the 10% rule, but there's no sense in arguing over it, because it ain't gonna happen.
Do we want to put a time to quit? I mean, does anyone have, tell me.
5 minutes,
I could do, but we're gonna do it sometime. We could do that, it would be done. There you go.
It was much later. You're gonna take us all out to dinner, Joe.
I don't have a way to get there.
I'll get you there.
I got a message, she was on the phone, she goes, did you tell him about he needs new electric sensors? We have to order them, this and that, and then she goes, that's not the wrong, she left me the wrong message. Unfortunately, I didn't know that. All right,
Okay.
hey, Liz. Oh, okay. I'm gonna make a recommendation that we go for no more than 45 minutes.
Okay.
Let's see if we break at a point in time, about 4:15. Unless Jim wants to go longer like you. I'll vote for Jim, because I know how he votes.
Yeah, me too.
Let's start our last section at 4 o'clock, or last category at 4 o'clock.
Well, I think we ought to give appropriate attention to things that,
We don't need to start thinking through it. Let's figure around 4 o'clock, that we find a section to end what we have.
Okay.
All right, we're in RCD now.
We can start RCD, sure.
Don't forget your microphones.
Turn your mics back on if you're, to the public, if there is any, I guess.
But there may be in the future, because, the YouTube
Right,
archives it.
yeah, you're right,
People
sorry.
can look back, yeah.
RCD. Any thoughts on this?
well, I have a question on this one. There's a footnote 1 on page 29 that apparently grandfathers development opportunity. Is that true? Is that grandfathering anything built before December 1985?
What page?
29.
Right, so this is from critical area law, right? And critical area law requires that there must be 20 acres per dwelling unit in order to create a lot. And this creates however, for a parcel that already has 2 separate houses on the one parcel created by this date, you can subdivide those to create parcels even if you don't meet the 20-acre requirement.
Okay,
And
so
that's a
state law.
critical, we're just importing that language. So it gives the ability for people who have multiple houses on an existing parcel not to sort of be trapped with that forever if they don't have 20 acres apiece. Yeah.
On page 31, it says, we're in a new district, that's rural.
Can I jump in real quick? I missed something in ag. It's short. I noticed that there was an administrative review added, cottage industries. I'm just curious. Cottage Industries, Tradesmen, and Artisan Shops, which was previously Board of Appeals.
Correct. That was a task force item discussion.
Ah, okay.
It was, the idea was that when people grow from a home occupation to a cottage industry, it's a bigger step because of a lot of the reviews. So there were two issues, was who reviews it, and then I think it's one of the few uses that there's a provision to waive the securities if it seems acceptable. So those were two things, and I think those were buck items. So,
Obviously, I didn't recall that, but.
yeah, no, it's micro detail. And I don't think we talked about where that would show up, but in the end, it seemed like it was a good idea to stick it in the list so it'd be obvious to people, maybe. Carla has noted that she thinks in a few places I put in a little too much didactic, but, I try to leave breadcrumbs, so. Oh, okay, sir.
I gotta make another trip
Okay.
to the train station.
Safe travels.
See you next time, Jim.
Anything more on RCD?
No.
About rural character?
I have a concern about the statement at the end of the paragraph that describes it, that says, "Public water and sewer may not be extended into this district except to correct a public health emergency."
That's a state requirement.
Why are we saying we wouldn't do public water and sewer unless there's a health?
That's a state requirement.
It's a state requirement.
That's smart growth. That they don't want you to spread your growth out all over the county. They want your growth to be designated in designated growth areas.
Okay, but we don't have that sentence in either the ag district or the RCD.
So the change in the code is that originally the code or current code says it will not be extended. And we've softened it to say it may not be extended. So it's really trying to open the door and make that language a little bit softer. But Mr. Crowding's right. There are many, many areas in the county that are built on, now I'm going to blank on the name. Denied access.
Denied access.
Denied access lines. So, and I think this is a zoning district that has a number of those. But the change was just to try to make it a little less restrictive, so we might have the opportunity to argue that on certain properties. So I know commissioners are looking into sort of how are we going to handle denied access? Are there ways in certain cases to access denied access? So that's a bigger argument.
That's the reason when we were discussing the Rock Hall master plan, there's one whole end of Rock Hall that's all denied access that I brought up, I mentioned at the meeting. And here they want to expand and build, possibly have some lots or have an area for expansion, and you can't do it.
Right, but I think the first step in all these things is loosening up your codes and your comp plan so that you at least allow it, and then you have the ability to argue it. If your code and your comp plan forbid it, then there's no point in going to the state and saying, we'd like to try to possibly do something if you've already forbidden it yourself. Right. So,
You got several denied access lines, and that's,
I would have thought that decisions to expand public sewer and water were a local.
Yeah, it is.
A
It is
local
if you,
authority.
it is if you finance it 100% with Kent County money, but the minute you borrow money from the state of Maryland, you're abiding by their regulations. And their regulations state that They may say you may not, I'm thinking will not, but,
They probably say they will not, Bill.
and,
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but I don't, truthfully, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, if you're gonna do let's say a small subdivision or something where you're gonna have public sewer, who's doing the subdivision? It's not the town or the
well,
county.
they
doing
don't
the
say,
subdivision.
hey, they don't say that you can't go out on 300 acres and create a subdivision and have your own independent water and wastewater plant out there
Right.
and spray it on. They're not saying that, they're just saying that you're not gonna push that county line through an open area, because that may if you don't do it as a restricted line, that entitles me with my 100-acre farm to come in there and do a major subdivision on it. And they don't want that. They don't want you running a school bus 20 miles outside of Chestertown to pick up middle school students and haul them back in here or provide services out there. They want the growth to take place around what they call designated growth areas. And that's in the Maryland Smart Growth Plan, and you got to adhere to it. If you don't adhere to it,
Well, that's the tier maps, right?
the
You-
Secretary,
you don't
yeah,
do
and the
it right.
Secretary of Planning sat in here about 10 years ago and told those commissioners, hook them up if you want. You're going to pay us back all that money. You're going to, not only on that system, but any other system that you build.
And part of the reason you get there is we have existing facilities, and somewhere fairly outside a neighborhood has a failing septic systems. So they're sort of an emergency situation. So the state helps pay for the funding. They run a pipe through a completely undeveloped area to save that neighborhood, but then they make it so you can't connect along the pipe, because the idea was not to create neighborhoods on lollipops. It was to save one community, and we've had a couple of them where
We
everything's
did
not
that
working.
just up at Georgetown.
Yeah, Georgetown, Chesterville Forest, same
And then we
thing.
gave we
Yeah, we
allowed them to do the park, hook that
Yeah,
up a
Toll
couple
Park.
months ago.
Right.
And that's a big process to go
And that
through.
was done, the health emergency was at Olivet Hill. But somehow we ended up at Georgetown too, but Olivet Hill didn't want to hook up, so.
But other people along the line were allowed to hook in, weren't they?
No, denied access, no.
The only one we gave was Toll Park up
Toll
there
Park.
was allowed to hook up.
Because that was, we
but
determined
that
it was a
through
public
process,
need. The county felt it was a public need for the public park.
What about the line that they proposed from Betterton to Still Pond? Expanding the Betterton site.
I don't know, I don't know.
I think that they could push that out there. It met, except to correct a public health emergency. And I don't know of many septic systems out in Still Pond that probably aren't in pretty bad shape.
Well, I agree, but they were also saying the people along the line, which runs all the way from Betterton.
I don't think so.
I doubt they'd ever
And
do
it's still
that,
public.
unless they had a health emergency.
Yeah, I don't think so. There are provisions in that. If you have a house that's all along that line and it has a failing septic system, they'll allow you to hook up. But it has to be an existing dwelling. There's a long process. The commissioners argue about it
Yeah.
almost every month, at least.
We have a comprehensive water and sewer plan as well as a comprehensive plan, and that has all those rules laid out and what is and is not in a service area and how you amend it, and all of that's reviewed by MDE, and if the state doesn't approve it, you don't get to do it. There's a fair bit of rules.
She probably doesn't want me to tell you this, but if you do want some questions answered, on 218 Mount Vernon Avenue, the Secretary of Planning lives right there, so you can ask her.
Although we don't recommend it.
No. I will say, I think it's easier to follow.
Yeah.
And I've read that ordinance for years, Bill, and I think this isn't, it does, it's easier to, at least you can look in there and see, you haven't got to be flipping back and forth and get halfway through a project and find out you can't do it because you didn't go to page 439 or something. So,
Thank you.
the footnotes, I like the footnotes.
Definitely much more user-friendly.
I don't have anything until we get to village district. And And the one thing I would suggest there, Bill, in the statement of intent, is that you have in E, promote mixing of uses and that enhance the character, vitality, attractiveness. I would add the word walkability as something that we want to consider.
Where's that?
Page 49.
So in the description of things that are desired and being promoted by this district, you like walkability as well as things like enhancing character.
Oh, yeah, just add it as a consideration.
No one had anything on community residential? Or,
I did.
okay.
And maybe this is something I need to think about a little bit more, but I'm,
Are we back to community
Yeah.
residential?
yeah, community residential. Why are we making short-term vacation rentals an accessory use there and then an actual permitted use in the village, intense village, and what's the other?
Ag,
Oh, it pointed out to me that it really needs to be a permitted use in all the districts and not mixed up with accessory. It's my drafting error.
Well, and my question,
Let's talk about content, but I kind of muddled that a little.
I'm just wondering whether it needs to be a permitted use at all. Because the county is trying to regulate short-term rental, vacation rentals for revenue purposes is one, but then I think there's a larger concern about housing availability and how short-term rentals impacts housing here where we don't have so much of it. And I'm not sure that it's the case in other jurisdictions, that it's just made outright a permitted use versus something people do with their property. They're not restricted, if they're not restricted by an HOA covenant, that then they either have to have licensed or, and I think that's what I heard in the commissioners' meeting, this past commissioners' meeting, or the one before, where they're actually going to be getting a software program to be better able to track short-term rentals, collect the tax.
Well, I can speak to that, because the Economic Development Commission is the group that's doing that work with the Development Office. The program that they're getting is one that allows them to track. First, they're in the process of identifying all the short-term rentals and making sure that they are on tap to pay the rooming tax that they need to pay for, on their rentals. But they haven't really sought any, we haven't sought any limitations. That's become a matter for the neighborhoods, particularly HOAs, to address in their rules. I don't think they are recommending, in fact, I'm quite sure they're not recommending any limits.
When the task force discussed this, and I remember, member of Commissioner's Office was here and talked about stuff at Mako. What we did was, it should be as a permitted use in each primarily residential zoning district, that's like AZD up till, I guess up through village. And then, so it's permitted use, and then the use description in Article 3 is short-term vacation rentals. Kent County hotel rental taxes will be paid for each unit, and the required quarterly report will be filed by any establishment that provides sleeping accommodations for compensation for a period not exceeding 4 months. The idea being, by putting it in the zoning code as a permitted use with this requirement, it gives enforcement teeth. Because right now, all we do is collect money if people send it, and there's no way to enforce it if they don't. So it was creating it as a permitted use in the zoning code, so then we can use the $100 a day zoning violation as the enforcement tool for those who don't pay the taxes.
I personally think it's gonna be an enforcement headache.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, I'm out there every day. I have nothing but complaints to me, especially on these little old waterfront communities, even some of the newer developments. Quite frankly, it's a big difference to have someone living next door to you that's full-time resident than someone that's coming in there for 3 days and bringing as many people as they can fit in that house. And we've got them, I mean,
Using a private road.
yeah, I just, I give Kelly Park as one example down there at Rock Hall. I mean, they're overrun with them. The people have found out down there that have the waterfront houses that it's better to get on their boat and go someplace and tie up at a marina for the summer and rent those out. And quite frankly, anyone that's got one, an Airbnb is going to make more money renting them out on weekends than he does renting it full-time all year long. And look, I don't care one way or the other. I just think it's going to be an enforcement headache.
Who's going to enforce it?
Well, my understanding is, and it's a shame Jamie's not here anymore, is that the county is looking into software and a vendor, and that vendor would alert the county to all of the folks who are advertising their home on, like, you know,
VRBO, Airbnb.
VRBO, and then they would be able to cite them and send them a bill, and then if they didn't respond and didn't pay the bill, then we would cite them. So planning and zoning would get involved when it becomes a zoning violation. But in the beginning, they would, I believe they would get a letter from the county saying you owe us taxes, so, and only those who are unresponsive.
Well, the bigger issue, is the ones down at the water, they come with a camper. The house they register, they advertise a 3-bedroom with a bath and a pool, but that doesn't mean that 3 people show up or 2 couples show up. It means it's a party house for the weekend, or bachelor party, bachelorette parties, whatever, and, they pull up on the lawn, and, we have them in certain neighborhoods I've seen, and the complaints come in, but.
This body is separate from the task force. If you want to recommend something different, that's fine.
Well, I think that, to me, as for enforcement, that's is that, the process to collect the $100, you end up going to court or put a lien on it or something, but, once the person's quiet enjoyment of their property is ruined, is the planning enforcement staff coming out on a, Saturday afternoon? No, I don't believe they are. But that's when, it's like the wedding regulations, of who says the music stopped at 11? How do we enforce that stuff?
I think it'd be good as a special exception, and let them come in here and plead their case. The neighbors can come in and say what they got to say, and it may be fine on one spot, and it may not on the other. I mean, a guy come in here and say, well, I bought this house for $250,000. I don't plan on staying there.
I'll buy it.
I'm going to rent it out as an Airbnb, and I can give you an example of one, take you to it right now, where he probably spent $750,000 on it, and hadn't spent one night in there himself. But, like I said, I always did like the special exception. You could put, conditions on it, and if they don't meet them and the neighbors complain, then,
It also allows for the enforcement for the county too. If they come through, then you go, if they, that's my trouble, they advertise the bedrooms.
You won't have to get the software to track them.
Yeah.
You already know where they are.
Local nuisance ordinances and noise ordinances.
We
We don't have a noise ordinance.
We don't?
Well, we do, but they don't know how to enforce it.
Yeah.
We just went through that with
Yeah,
American Legion.
Yeah.
you got the
We
lead.
warn you, if we make a special exception, we might be looking at 100 special exceptions coming through.
Well,
The town of Centerville did that, made it a special exception. Talbot County does a
100 special-
license,
100 special exceptions,
But-
and we just meet more, and
they get
Obviously, the
renewed,
county's making more money,
it's
so we
not.
get
The license, you're already paying for it anyway, so there's some revenue right away.
I mean, a lot of jurisdictions are just struggling with that.
what's the
My
definition of a
question-
short-term rental? What's the
I
line?
think it's back in here, son, the
Is it back in there?
definition.
I'm sorry.
4
4 months.
consecutive months, I think, is what, less
So
than
short-term rental, 4 months, that's a college semester. So all the college, all the students in town that rent houses,
They do
Well,
that
they-
already.
do they?
But they rent houses. I mean, they have leases for, it's not Airbnb. They have, I mean, most owners I know lease them out.
So I know that the county's desired approach has been to collect taxes on these uses as a way of generating revenue. So I don't think prohibiting them or limiting them in sort of widespread fashion we're discussing would probably fit into the plan of us spending money on a vendor in order to get revenue from those people operating businesses. At some point, we might have to make some restrictions, I agree, it might, it gets too out of hand, and this body, you can recommend to county officials whatever you wish, but I just know there's been a lot of discussion about spending money to get a vendor, to collect taxes to get revenue, so that has been the focus.
My concern only is just sort of, this seems like giving explicit permission to short-term rentals by making them a permitted use.
Yeah, we still, and you got short-term rentals, and they gotta come in for something, because you got parking problems, you got all kinds of different things.
So they're really, right now, the proposal, the regulation is they pay their taxes.
Well, you get into a health department situation. I mean, you sit there and you have a house and you apply for a permit through the health department to construct it, and you got 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and they're figuring you've got 4 people living in the house, so they're sizing your septic system for that, and suddenly you've got 12 people. Then you got that system failing or something, I don't know, I just think it's a quagmire, and I think it's gonna be an enforcement headache. I'd hate to think one of them was right next door to me, but
Get a rooster.
get a rooster, and a goat, and some sheep.
Yeah.
Goat and sheep won't bother them, but the rooster.
If I put that pen close enough to their house, it'll bother
There
them.
was a bachelor party and one down in Skinner's back down there. You had a goat, they'd been cooking that thing.
The chicken.
Well, moving on.
I'd definitely go with the peacock.
Cindy, were you
The
okay
neighbor
with
had one,
CA?
we thought it
That's-
was a child
That was my
crying.
only comment there. Well, I mean, it's applicable in other districts.
In the many districts, we can straighten that out.
White geese.
Why don't we do Intense Village and call it quits, because then we'll be into commercial and uses. My opinion. Ray, all right?
Second.
I agree with you.
It's easy to
agree with the
can't get approval for this. It breaks it a little bit from residential type uses.
Intenseville.
I found it interesting that you said this was to form prosperous neighborhoods. We don't have that anyplace else. What's the intent there?
What's the original language that's in the current code?
It's in the current code. Okay, so that's the only place we're going to
With statements of intent, I've only tried to preserve the existing and add, if there was anything changed, to try to add things separately, so it's clear that we're preserving our statements of intent, and there's some clarifying language if needed. In this case, this district, right, the consultant recommended upping the density for both Village and Intense Village, so that we would have some apartment scale density opportunities. So this is the one with the highest density, where you're, suggesting, and had suggested, and I think Task Force accepted, going up to 12 units per acre. So that would be the highest density in the county that's by regulation. There are some special uses where you can pitch something that might be higher than that, but that's different. This is only by right.
On this one for animal husbandry, I think we may want to consider making backyard chickens a special exception, given the density.
How's everyone feel about that?
I agree.
Okay.
Also, multifamily dwellings is not defined. Do we want to specify condos, co-ops, as well as multifamily or duplexes? Or
Those are
put a
owner- those are
definition?
ownership patterns, not necessarily building types. And we do define multifamily dwelling. On page 355. It's just dwelling, comma, multifamily. All the dwellings are done that way, so they all got stuck together. A
I'm
building-
sorry?
All the, like, multifamily dwelling, single-family dwelling, they're always dwelling, comma, and then the name, just so they all end up in the same place. They're on page 355. This is all existing
Oh, okay.
language. No changes proposed. A building
I'm sorry.
designed for and occupied exclusively by 3 or more families living independent from each other. So it's 3 or more families in the same building is what makes it multifamily.
So a duplex is not multifamily?
It's not. It's defined as 2 family. It's a separate definition because in some districts, only the 2 families allowed as opposed to multifamily.
Okay.
So backyard chickens is a special exception.
And what about private garages, swimming pools, game courts, and other customary? Right now, that's an accessory use. If you have a really dense thing, should it be a special exception?
Well, this is being added because I think it was inadvertently not originally included. And this is the one, I think, where we changed the setback from being 25 feet to not being 25 feet. If I recall.
I thought you did it in the village district. I don't pay attention to the other. I think it was 25 feet before or something like that.
Right.
This is 8 feet setback.
So I guess, I mean, to require somebody to get a special exception for building a garage on their house or swimming pool in their house just for this district, I think that would really set it out. It would be very different. Right, I mean, these are expected uses with the residents. Even though Village and Intense Village are mixed-use districts, many of the land that's zoned, much of the land that's zoned Village is single-family residences on a lot. It's not, you know, I mean, I think these are our mixed-use districts because we'd like to see that. I don't know how much actual product is on the ground that's mixed-use. It is mainly neighborhoods and small businesses.
Quite frankly, the lots I've seen created in the Village and Intense Village are not big enough to put a swimming pool in the backyard anyhow.
Do that, and then you have the health department reservation for septic.
Well, you can't have a development in the Intense Village unless you got sewer and water.
Well, yeah, Intense Village, yeah, but I'm just talking village, because I live in the village.
But game
District.
courts, you're gonna put tennis courts or hockey courts in these areas? It's an accessory use.
That'll give the guys in the Airbnb something to play with out in the yard. Am I right, Bill, in reading that if I wanted to put a swimming pool, I'd have to be 10 and 10? So that, in the Intense Village, on the size of the lots that'd be put out there, that really cut you down.
Lap pool,
Yeah, there wouldn't be much room.
It's just a lap pool, just a lane.
We can certainly, it doesn't have to be 10 and 10. It can certainly be a different dimension if you want to recommend something different.
No, I'm fine with that.
I think we did, for the village, we did
5 and 10, wasn't it?
5
5 and
and 10.
5, or it used to be 5 and 3, now it's 5 and 5.
Right. You all had asked me to go through and look at each district and kind of make some variation based on what was happening in the district. So, again, and this is, I think there's actually very limited land that's in Intense Village, and I think it's basically one large parcel somewhere. Carlo knows this better than I that or everything, because there aren't very many.
Intense Village, yeah. There was a piece up by Dixon, wasn't there?
Right, that's the one I'm thinking of. I don't know if there's another, but it's a large undeveloped piece. So it's
How about
not
out
a
in
lot of
Millington? Is there one out there somewhere? In Millington?
Well, we can certainly change that, so if you think that's too restrictive.
I think it's fine.
Build yourself an infinity pool. What they should do out there at the marina, put an infinity pool up there where all the storage is.
I think if we're done with Intense Village, I recommend we take a break for a month.
I second that motion.
But I'll,
That gets us through Intense Village.
yeah. So we have the commercial ones next, and that's different.
That's a whole different thought process.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Any person, any staff, Mark, Beth, come on, Beth, tell us something.
Is it cold, Beth? Your neck cold?
Phil, do you have anything for the?
I do have
Okay,
one
go ahead.
thing, just now that Campbell is not with us, although living happily ever after in Alexandria, I wanted to propose that for their next set of minutes, that I use Claude or one of those folks, do some AI and see how you like it. If that's possible, it'll save an enormous amount of staff time.
Use what?
AI, artificial intelligence.
I don't have any problem with it.
No.
Might be able to get rid of one or two more.
Please don't do that.
There'll be a bunch of laptops and iPads set up here next.
Yeah, this is what it would look like.
I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
Thanks. Anything, Cindy, for,
No.
I'll get you the definitions. Oh, and the AZ, when are they looking at the Ag Advisor? Are they looking at that like in weeks, months, or?
So I think at the October 23rd meeting, they asked that I come up with sort of a summary document of what they talked about. They're going to review it individually, and if anybody thinks like I missed something, they'll say it, but I think they're kind of done with their process, so.
Okay. So
So I
that
can
can get, be
forward that
got,
to you
yeah,
after
that's
they
what
give
say,
me the
that
thumbs
would
up.
save us
Yep.
time maybe on that, going back over those, where we left at.
And again, their focus was really on sort of language under the description of how you handle uses that they just said it's just outdated, so that was their main
Good.
concern. Yeah.
And just for that, Intense Village is, at least on this map, is only by Dixon up there. They'll have a beautiful view of the solar panels when they get done.
Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second?